After President Trump's national address on Thursday, what are the after effects? How did the media react? Well, the media's reaction was to ignore it at first, but then they took an attitude of rebutting President Trump. Almost all the media is now playing the role of the opposition party. When I say media, I mean the so-called mainstream media. So how should we view this phenomenon? That's a very interesting thing. This is the main analysis I'm bringing you today, which is the aftershocks following Trump's speech. Another thing is that Rubio convened a summit of foreign ministers from 67 countries, launching a global counteroffensive against a certain force. So what exactly is this force? All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Fangway. Well, it's not good morning anymore, it's good afternoon. Hello to our YouTube viewers and hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope Silicon Valley, FM 961. Now, let's get straight to the point. First, let's talk about the changes in the Middle East situation. The war between the U.S. and Iran continues to escalate. The U.S. launched its seventh night of attacks on Iran, hitting a total of hundreds of locations. What are some of the places particularly worth noting? It's the attack on the city of Bandar Abbas in southern Iran, and the nearby Hajiabad region's broadband and broadband traffic hubs, launching attacks on the internet network, causing 116 telecommunications towers to go offline. Additionally, they struck two strategic water towers in the Benemani district of Sirik province in southern Iran. They completely destroyed them and cut off the water supply to all villages in the Bamani district and the nearby city of Kohistak. So this is something very much worth paying attention to. Is the U.S. launching a full-scale attack on Iran's basic economic infrastructure? And it's not like that. Well, we'll talk about what's really going on in a moment. Also, it's rumored that the top commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy, Rear Admiral Azmeh, has been killed in a U.S. airstrike on his Bushehr Command and Control Center. We are now waiting for further verification. Furthermore, British Prime Minister Starmer has already accepted President Trump's request that U.S. forces can land directly in the U.K. That is to say, they can use U.S. Air Force bases in the U.K. to directly carry out bombings on Iran. So, is the U.S. attacking Iran's entire basic economic infrastructure? No. This is a very difficult thing for Trump. I think he would drag this out until the very end and only do it if there was absolutely no other choice. But didn't I just say they're already hitting the power lines and hitting the internet traffic lines? They're already hitting the water towers. Why? They're only hitting the area on the north shore of the Strait of Hormuz, south of the Persian Gulf. In other words, these actions are all moving in the direction of taking over the relevant areas on the North Shore. At least that's what common sense analysis suggests. So these are effective military strikes, actions taken in coordination with military objectives, rather than an attempt to destroy Iran's entire economic infrastructure. So that's the situation. Now, on Iran's side, they're also striking out in a big way. So Iran has launched attacks against Kuwait's power plants and desalination plants, all of them. There's also, and including Kuwait's state-owned oil company, which is called the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. So they were all hit, which triggered major fires. In addition, Iran also used missiles to attack Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Actually, for nearly the past 4 months, Iran hadn't attacked Saudi Arabia. But today, they've started again, launching drone and missile attacks against Saudi Arabia. Now, as far as we know, Iran hasn't attacked Israel yet. Why is that? Israel's just waiting for them to attack. If you hit me, I definitely won't, fail to strike back. Because right now, Trump is restraining Israel from attacking Iran. But if Iran goes and attacks Israel, then Trump won't be able to restrain Israel anymore. So this is the current situation. It's really for Iran, it's a case of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Also, regarding the Middle East oil pipelines, while the war continues to escalate, President Trump is making strategic moves. That is, using pipelines to transport more oil out of the Middle East. Now, we all know that in the past, 20% of the world's crude oil went through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, besides the Saudi pipeline crossing the Arabian Peninsula to the port of Yanbu, there are also, pipelines to ports in Turkey, as well as pipelines to the Mediterranean, crossing Syria and Jordan. The reason these pipelines were actually built back in the 1950s and later abandoned is because the Middle East, it's a powder keg. These places are all very unsafe. So they were abandoned because of the chaos of war. But now, as Syria, Israel, and the United States move toward essentially an alliance, all these pipelines are being restored and repaired. So as time goes on, at a certain point, the throughput of the Strait of Hormuz, its importance will continue to decrease. This is what's happening now. So the world, while facing problems, is also automatically finding answers. The free market will find answers, right? In the end, it's very likely that the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran still wants to choke off, will be just a place of little use. Okay, next, let's talk about a key point for today, which is the shocking aftermath of Trump's Thursday speech. How so? We all know that this Thursday, Trump gave a national address. This was the U.S. president speaking to the American people. Now, the two major networks, ABC and NBC, didn't broadcast it at all. CBS aired half and then stopped. Fox aired the whole thing. But after it finished, the subsequent analysis and commentary were very brief. I don't know if you saw. By the next day, the mainstream media initially had, well, basically nothing, and then a small snippet appeared. And such articles are usually just attacks on Trump, saying you have no evidence, everything you said is already known, and so on and so forth. So I wonder, is this phenomenon normal or not? Let me tell you how a normal media outlet should operate. If the U.S. president delivers such a national address, and after the speech, all related documents, about 58 reports, are made public, then the media, normal media, should immediately set up a special task force to analyze it overnight without rest, because everyone needs to be fast, right? If you're a bit slow, you've turned what was fresh news into old news. So they analyze it all night, and then the next day, they should have continuous coverage. You have to clarify all the facts, right? And then you need to organize opinion pieces or even set up debates between people with different viewpoints. That's just how it normally works. But now, the U.S. media, we're saying, hasn't done any of that. Basically, they didn't even broadcast it to begin with. So Trump called them out and said their licenses should be revoked. And then, the articles they published were just rebuttals. Just rebuttals. You know, the media's job is to report the facts first. Rebutting or agreeing is the job of commentators, not the media's job. Now the media skips the reporting and goes straight to rebutting what President Trump said. This in itself is an extremely, absurd thing. It's a dereliction of duty. It's unprofessional. First of all, as public media, not reporting is a dereliction of duty. But why would the media take on such a strange role, truly becoming an opposition party? Well, Mr. Tang Yuan, I saw a show he did this morning, and he said it's because they're in a conspiracy. They're in a conspiracy. So President Trump's Thursday speech was actually exposing them. So how could they report on it? Okay, is that view correct? Let's look back at 2020. After the 2020 election ended, the media could really be said to be in unison, calling Trump the loser, even including Fox News. So I kept saying back then, I called him Fox Media, Fox Media. In Arizona, when the votes hadn't even been fully counted, Fox just called it for Trump to lose. So, of course, Fox has many great journalists. So it's not everyone at Fox, but the top bosses of that media outlet. We all remember that late night in 2020, late at night, 6 swing states stopped counting votes at the same time. Then the Biden curve appeared. So in this election, Biden's vote count was, do you remember? 81 million. We all know Biden is just a shadow of Obama. And when Obama was at his peak, his highest vote count was only 66 million. Is it possible for Biden's vote count to exceed his by more than 20%? And then there's another phenomenon, remember? There's a concept in the U.S. called a wind vane. What's a wind vane? In English, it's called a bellwether. Bellwether means that this state or this city, this county, its demographic ratio is like a macro level U.S. in miniature. So for states and counties like these, their election results often predict the national election results because their population is very similar to the composition of Democrats and Republicans, the composition of political leanings. It's like a microcosm of the whole country. Now, this country has 3 bellwether states. One is Ohio, one is Florida, at least back then, and one is Iowa. So what are the 20 bellwether counties? There are many counties. I won't count them one by one. There are 20 counties. In short, there are 23 bellwethers that, generally speaking, have accurately predicted the results of U.S. presidential elections for decades. So in 2020, Trump won all 3 bellwether states. Out of the 20 bellwether counties, 19. Trump won 19 of them. In the end, Trump actually lost to Biden, and Biden's vote count reached a record-breaking 81 million in U.S. history. So how is that possible? Right? These are all issues. But then, shortly after the election ended, election monitoring agencies like CISA declared the election completely reliable. The media unanimously announced Biden's victory in relevant states before the votes were even finished being counted. So from then until now, have you noticed, including Fox News, every time they mention Trump's belief about 2020, that there was election fraud in 2020, they always say Trump falsely claimed, adding a falsely. Trump wrongly believes that there was fraud in the 2020 election. Just think about it. You say Trump believes we're about 2020. Just describing the facts is enough. That's the media's job. Why does the media have to add wrongly believes in the middle? This is a classic case in the media of what's called reporting while commenting, reporting while giving an opinion. I report to tell you the objective facts while at the same time departing from my objective standards to tell you what my opinion is. This is reporting while commenting, which is a major taboo in the media. So in the past 6 years, all mainstream media have been committing this major taboo. Is it because they don't understand professionalism? Do they not have the capacity to be professional? That's impossible, right? It's done intentionally. So, indeed, I agree with what Mr. Tangwan said. They are actually in a conspiracy. The reason for the conspiracy is because Trump, in their eyes, Trump is a disruptor of the existing order. So, in 2020, the Democrats, plus the establishment within the Republican Party, plus the CCP, plus the media, plus, how should I put it? The election offices plus the so-called intelligence agencies joined forces to take down Trump, and they indeed succeeded. This was actually a coup that took place in America back then. So now President Trump's speech on Thursday to call this out is actually calling out such a plot. Okay, I have 3 points to share with you here. Please listen and see if what I'm saying makes sense. First, a regime of a republic, a regime of a democratic republic, no matter how well it was constrained by constitutional power when the republic was founded. But the regime itself will still grow in power, eventually turning the tables on his masters. This is what the American founding fathers said back then. He said that although we are citizens coming together by agreement as we the people, as the masters of the country, we find a servant to protect our rights. This is the source of government from the perspective of the U.S. Constitution. But this servant will one day turn the tables and become too powerful. This is exactly what is happening in America right now. These are what President Trump calls the deep state. Those who have been running the country for a long time. They believe that only the country they recognize is the country. Let me give you an example. There's a person named Nicky Flores. In 2020, he was the FBI's Deputy Assistant Director of Counterintelligence, and at the same time, he was an official in charge of election security for 2020. He was directly involved in recalling and suppressing a key FBI intelligence report. What did this report say? It said that the CCP government was producing fake American driver's licenses and exported to pro-CCP individuals in the U.S. to forge mail-in ballots to support Biden. This report was produced by the FBI in August 2020, but it was then urgently recalled, and all copies were ordered to be destroyed. The reason given was that they needed to re-verify the sources of the interviews. At the same time, U.S. Customs and Border Protection did intercept nearly 20,000 fake passports from China. Actually, Fang Wei and Xintian reported on this back in 2020. We interviewed someone, a princeling, who told us at the time that in CCP factories in Guangdong, China, they weren't just making fake driver's licenses, but also counterfeit money, fake U.S. dollars. They were also producing fake ballots for the U.S. election, which were then shipped through Mexico and Canada and smuggled across the border into the U.S. to influence the election. Now, this footage, this interview, Xintian is currently restoring it. We actually had to delete it back then, but we finally found it. Xintian is working hard on it. He didn't even sleep last night. Once it's finished, we'll release it for everyone to see, so keep an eye out for my notifications. Also, you can subscribe to Xintian Face to Face. This explosive news will be revealed then. Now, the official I just mentioned, this former official, her name is Nikki Flores. She's now moved to Microsoft to work in the private sector. At the time, she didn't just do that. She even bragged, saying, "I'm basically running a shadow government within the FBI now. I'm running a shadow government." This is the kind of arrogance these FBI agents have. And the FBI director at the time, Christopher Wray, said the same thing when testifying before Congress, claiming that no large-scale foreign interference was found. This included the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is under the Department of Homeland Security. They also issued an assessment stating that the 2020 election had no large-scale foreign interference. Why are they telling these lies? Because they believe America belongs to them and Trump is a disruptor. Since Trump is a political outsider, where did he come from? He actually wants to take America away from us. So they teamed up with the media, political parties, election offices, NGOs, and as we now know, this is very important, the CCP, to stage a revolt and force Trump out of office. But Trump is the duly elected president. He is the legitimate person who should be leading America. They forced him out. What does that say? Okay, that's the first point. A government will become very powerful over time, turning from a servant into a master. Second, when the media fails to perform its function, the government becomes too powerful. Because the government is already strong, the media is what's supposed to keep it in check. If the media doesn't do what the media is supposed to do, just like in 2020, right? Then the government can't be restrained. If the media is helping the government do evil, then it's even more one-sided, right? This is the second problem, and both of these problems exist in America. So what do we do now? I think the third thing is that these media outlets must be replaced. These media outlets must be replaced. Replaced by whom? By people who can uphold factual fairness. People who can report the truth without fear of pressure. People who can set aside their own views and tell everyone the facts. This is what the channel you're watching is trying to do, along with all the channels like Fangway Time that I think you can trust. Actually, we are media professionals. We were originally professional media people. We just don't serve in professional media anymore. We chose to start our own channels. The content we produce is, I think, the same as professional media. No, not the same. I think it has a stronger sense of morality than they do now. And the professionalism isn't bad either. Okay, so now the problem is here. Trump spoke for 24 minutes yesterday, or the day before. He gave such important information, so many people are saying, well, are you going to prosecute next? Are you going to have a trial? He will certainly do it, but this matter is a slow remedy for an urgent problem. He can't get to it all. Why? You have to investigate, prosecute, try, sentence, appeal, and appeal again, and finally, they're locked up. Every case takes 5 to 10 years. You know about that Epstein thing. It's already been made public, so why is there no follow-up? Why hasn't anyone been arrested? Because prosecuting someone involves a massive amount of what's called judicial resources. Just because someone goes to Epstein's, whatever, his island, does that prove they're guilty? No. How much ironclad evidence do you need before you can prosecute them? So Trump's 24-minute speech wasn't saying that in America very soon, in my remaining year and a half, I'll arrest 500 people to make an example of them so no one dares to cheat again. He doesn't have time for that. The point of his speech was just to talk directly to the public. What he's inviting everyone to do is, please, let's not try to solve old problems. Let's solve new ones. Please, everyone, pass the Save America Act. Pass the Save America Act. So the next question is, how does the Save America Act itself get saved? This is what I've been telling you for 2 days straight, which is that citizens must speak up. You know, I've been calling on everyone to give you elected officials, 2 senators and 1 representative, to write to them, to email them, to write to them every day. If they do something right, you should praise them. If they do something wrong, you should urge them. You have to demand it of them, not just urge them. You have to demand that they do this. Now, although corruption has appeared in American politics, it hasn't reached the point where officials are suppressing the people. So American politics only has corruption, not a total collapse. At this time, the people need to take the attitude of being the masters, like we the people when America was founded, to go find the servants and tell them what I, the master, want, and to do it every single day. So these servants are able to take over today, not because they're so arrogant, but because they feel the master doesn't care, so they can just do as they please. If the master cared that much, then they wouldn't dare. So I mentioned to everyone yesterday that California SCA 5 case, Zentian and I did 28 reports in 20 days and later held seminars and so on. So how did Senator Hernandez, how did he withdraw it? He was shocked, like, wow, so many people are against it. Wow, so many Chinese Americans are against it. So forget it, I won't do this anymore. That's how it happened. So the people's voice is useful because American politics hasn't collapsed. American politics is just that everyone is too trusting, everyone ignores it, and when something happens, they pin all their hopes on Trump. Or pin it on the government, which is inherently wrong. American affairs, the design of this country, is that you can't pin everything on the government. Of course, President Trump and his team will do many things, but they've already taken on too much. Now, it looks like the Save America Act just won't pass. So what can be done? It can only be that every ordinary citizen stands up. The masters come forward to take a stand. Only then can the attitudes of these elected officials be changed. That is to say, now America is coming out to think for itself and ask itself to do things itself. Just like what President Kennedy said back then. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. You know, this kind of talk is not rare at all in China. China promotes all day long that you should contribute everything to the country, this and that. In America, it's not like that. The concept in America has always been that the state should serve its people. So when Kennedy said you should ask what you can do for your country, it was truly ear-splitting back then, because Americans weren't used to that phrasing. It's always been the state serving. How could it be me serving the state? But Kennedy reminded them, you have to ask what you can do for the country. So in many countries, things that aren't rare are very rare in America. So maybe now is the time to ask this question again. Now is the time to do things ourselves. When tiny streams converge into rivers and seas, everyone spends a little time every day expressing your support for tightening the American election system, restoring American democracy, this election integrity, not for the Republican Party. Nor is it for the Democratic Party. It's for the normalcy of America itself, for the justice of this country, America. Doing this is saving America. It's also saving the world, and it's also saving the future China. That's how I see this issue. Next, let's talk about what's going on with Rubio's global counteroffensive. So on Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio was presiding over a summit of foreign ministers from 60 countries, launching an action to crack down globally on what? Far-left political terrorism. The title of this meeting is the Ministerial Meeting on Preventing a Resurgence of Political Terrorism. Let me talk about the background of this meeting. In the 1960s to the 1970s, quite extensive left-wing violent activities actually occurred in the United States. At that time, like this, an organization called the Weather Underground, called the Underground Meteorologists. Such guerrilla groups, they were actually guerrilla groups, in dozens of cities across the United States, launched this arson, threw bombs, and attacked the police. At that time, they just wanted to take these black neighborhoods in major American cities. They became bases within the cities, guerrilla bases. So back then, between 1971 and 1972, in just a year and a half, the U.S. experienced, this is a true story, you might find it hard to believe now, but the U.S. was even more chaotic than it is today, with 2,500 incidents of these violent bombing incidents, actual bombings. So this was the U.S. in the 60s and 70s. At that time, alongside the civil rights movement, there was a rising communist movement. But that movement failed because it couldn't get a response from the public. Instead, it was condemned. Even in the black neighborhoods they tried to occupy, the residents said, the ones dying are our children. We don't support what you're doing. So it failed. Later, the Communist Party of the U.S. began its long march within the system, taking a softer approach. But now, Rubio says that left-wing terrorism in the U.S. is making a comeback in a new form once again, returning to the conditions of the 60s and 70s. It manifests as Antifa, radical transgenderism, and anarchist groups, and so on. Their method is to resort to violence. Well, President Trump released a U.S. counterterrorism strategy this May, labeling anarchists and Antifa as far-left violent extremists, categorizing them as one of the three major terrorist threats facing the U.S. What are the other two? The first is drug cartels, mainly from Central and South America. The second is Islamic terrorist groups, like those that launched 9/11. The third is far-left violent extremists. Traditionally, in the U.S., counterterrorism efforts have targeted far-right violence. But starting last year, for the first time in over 30 years, the number of left-wing terrorist attacks exceeded those of the far right. And it's the same situation in Germany and Europe. In Germany, 40% of new violent incidents come from left-wing or far-left groups, while in Greece, 80% of violent attacks are now carried out by far-left groups. So, in response to this phenomenon, Rubio convened a foreign minister summit of 67 countries, bringing together foreign ministers and their staff from 67 nations to address this issue on a global scale. Rubio said that far-left political terrorism is a real global threat that has existed for decades and is now resurging. Rubio said they hide behind various slogans and guises such as anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, anti-fascism, or they call themselves communists, anarchists, Marxists, and so on. They train and recruit in different countries, build digital systems, raise funds, and launch attacks. They can operate in multiple countries simultaneously, which amounts to a globally coordinated effort. He said the transnational nature of this threat requires a collective response from the international community, so we must join forces to defeat them. Rubio also mentioned that during the George Floyd incidents, dozens of cities across the U.S. were set ablaze, facing looting and vandalism. Furthermore, these transgender individuals opened fire on churches, killing high-ranking officials of American healthcare companies like CEOs, and 3 assassination attempts on President Trump, including the successful killing of an American youth leader, Charlie Kirk. Rubio said this represents a unique and rare evil, a toxic resentment cloaked in equality, justice, and liberation. It's a powerful desire to destroy the great things humanity has built, a deep-seated grudge to destroy all beauty and justice. And the political figures they support are those with ugly hearts who contribute nothing to the world. The advisor announced by the national team, Stephen Miller, who was Trump's speechwriter, he also spoke. He said a major characteristic of far-left violence and terrorism is their hypocritical use of civil liberties as a guise to hide their violent nature, directly threatening our national security and the survival of our republic. So Rubio said many politicians, because they use their, what was it called? Under the banner of fighting for social justice, they not only tolerate them, but also supposedly understand and sympathize with them, even treating their actions as sacred. So after the Floyd incident, with all the arson, looting, and vandalism, many local and city governments didn't prosecute at all, thinking they just did it on a whim, so they didn't punish them. So State Department officials also said at the summit that for many of our partners and allies, this has always been a blind spot. Now's the time to face this issue. Treasury Secretary Besson said the U.S. is stepping up efforts to identify organizations that abuse charities and nonprofits as illegal financing tools, cutting off their funding. Of course, I don't know if you understood what was said before. All these descriptions seem complex. What exactly are far-left violent extremists? Let me explain in plain terms. In Chinese terms, it's easy to understand. Simply put, what is the far left? It's the Communist Party. It's the Communist Party. Far-left violence is like the Communist Party's armed work teams. They want to eliminate their ideological enemies. Physical elimination. But violence alone isn't enough. It must be embellished and disguised to be sustainable and justifiable. So they have to provide rational reasons for their armed attacks. These reasons are very similar to what we were familiar with in China, called the poor being forced to take action out of resistance against exploitation by landlords and capitalists.